So thank you for joining us here for everyone. It's a very pleasure to me for to be here and share this time with John Hershfield. Thank you, John, again.
Thank you.
So John, it's someone that I really admire, and I know I meet him on last July at Orlando in the IOCD Con. So we meet each other, and we really have had a really good time over there. And so thank you, John. So we are gonna talk about today about anger and OCD, and I'm gonna present first John. John, it's director of the Center for OCD and Anxiety at Shepherd Pratt. Okay, so he's licensed marriage and family therapist, and so he's um, an author of so many books for OCD, like the Mindfulness Workbook for OCD, Overcoming Harm OCD, and the Want, Thoughts, and Intense Emotions Workbook, and many others. So thank you, John. And the thing that I've been thinking to do this talk about OCD and anger because I really like your book about harm OCD, and I something that I really think sometime it was about for some clients the anger or when they feel angry, sometimes it's some kind of confusing, it's some kind of triggering, because it's like for some clients it's something like why I'm feeling this, why I am feeling angry. Is that some kind of I'm is that some kind of obsession, or it's some kind of really desire that I want to do harm someone else? But so thank you, John. So I don't want to speak so much, but
Well,
yeah, you can
it's
say
a really
something about that.
interesting subject,
Yeah.
isn't it? Because when we talk about mental health and we say, okay, this person has this problem, we call this depression, we call this trauma, we call this OCD, and then we make these assumptions that, well, people with trauma are like this, and people with depression are like that, and people with OCD are like this. We sometimes forget that these are all just people, and people have all of the emotions that they could possibly have. They have, they can feel joy, they can feel sadness. And you can be very joyful without being manic and bipolar. You could be very sad without being depressed. And of course, you can experience anger because human beings experience anger.
Yeah.
If you have harm OCD, one of the problems with dealing with the emotion of anger is it can be very disorienting and confusing, right? Because, like you were alluding to, for some people, if the intrusive fear, the ego dystonic thought, the thing they don't want to come true, is that they will do something violent in response to anger, then the presence of anger will feel very threatening, right? So I could be very angry about something, and but without the harm OCD, it's just I'm angry about this thing. I'm not worrying about what's going to happen with the anger. So the anger itself, the experience of the emotion for people with harm OCD, um, are is sort of tagged as its own problem. I can't be angry because I can't trust that I'll be safe if I'm angry. And there are other conditions that have similar problems. People who have impulse control issues or certain types of personality disorders where anger can be the first sign that they're going to do something impulsively, that they might harm themselves. This is not true for OCD, but it's true in other conditions. So people with OCD worry about it a lot. What if I'm somebody when I get angry, I push people in front of the bus, or I pick up a pair of scissors and hurt myself or something like that because I'm angry and I can't control it. And that part of the problem I find in sort of making sense of anger when working with people like this is there's this instinct we want them to never feel anger because it's very painful for them, and yet we have to do exposure to their feelings of anger for them to learn to overcome their harm OCD. And also anger, while it's not, my favorite emotion, it is a normal human emotion. We have to learn how to deal with it.
Yes, thank you, John. I'm gonna explain something brief to all the people for Latino community or Hispanic. Lo que quiere decir aquí, John, igual lo que nos compartía para quienes no estén tan familiarizados con el inglés, es que justamente en breve la emoción de el enojo es una emoción adicional dentro de todo este repertorio de emociones y también es válido. Y justamente a veces puede ser confuso para los pacientes porque en otros trastornos, como por ejemplo hay, por ejemplo, el trastorno límite o o algunos otros trastornos donde hay conductas autolesivas, la emoción del enojo puede llevarlos a conductas de autodaño y eso puede generar confusión en los pacientes. So thank you, John. Yeah,
That's what I was trying to say. Exactly.
yeah, thank you.
I understood. I did understand about half of
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Um, you want to add sort of one additional thing here is that from a mindfulness perspective, like forget about OCD for a second, just like what is anger? What does it mean to be angry? The way I like to think about anger is that it's really a form of non-acceptance or a form of resistance. So basically, when we're angry, it means that there's something different from the way that we think it should be, and we can't solve it. We can't fix it. There's nothing we can do. So the body sort of gives us this stress response and this emotion called anger to kind of make us feel like we're doing something, even though we're not. And that's why it can be a very, disorienting kind of emotion because it doesn't accomplish anything. So I'm on my way to work and I want to get there on time, and then there's traffic, and now I'm stuck in traffic. And there's nothing I can do about it. And I'm so angry, right? I'm hitting the steering wheel like, why can't I get to work, right? There's no purpose to it whatsoever. It's just how people respond to things being different from how they want them to be when they know they can't do anything. Because if something comes up and it's a problem and I can fix it, I'm just going to fix it. I don't need to be angry about it. So sometimes we see people with OCD get angry when they're doing compulsions. For example, they're doing a ritual that's taking a long time and is very specific and intentional, and then someone interrupts them and they have to start over. It would be very understandable why that person might get very angry, right? Because there's nothing they can do in that moment, or it feels like there's nothing they can do in that moment because they're not accepting that things are different from the way that they want them to be.
Yes, thank you, John. So, lo que dice John es que justo hablando, haciendo una pausa sobre el TOC, la emoción del enojo es una emoción muy cotidiana, entonces es una reacción fisiológica que nos prepara para el actuar. Pero justo a veces también el enojo se presenta en el caso del TOC cuando los rituales o las compulsiones son interrumpidas y la persona se siente frustrada por la misma interrupción. Entonces es algo que también se llega a presentar muy frecuentemente. Thank you, John. Yeah, so yeah, I had some clients. I was thinking on one in specific that he has um OCD about harm his family. So the thing is like one of the obsessions that he gets is like what about if I am so angry, because he really gets some kind of difficult times with with his mom, and he thinks like what about if I am if we are arguing or maybe I can be so mad with her and I can this can escalate, and maybe I can push her to the stairs, so it's kind of for him it's some kind of complicated because it's something like I'm really feel pissed off about with her, like I don't really like how she talked to me, but the thing is like how can I uh, take the difference about I am feeling angry, but I don't want to push her to the downstairs. It's yeah,
Yeah.
for some clients it's complicated.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sí, lo que le menciona a John es que, por ejemplo, en mi caso hay algunos pacientes, y pienso en un paciente en particular que justamente él experimenta obsesiones de daño y parte de su confusión a veces es que justo tiene enojos, episodios de enojo con su mamá y tiene miedo a causarle daño a su mamá. Entonces, para él a veces es algo confuso diferenciar esto. Yes, John.
So the anger is let's assume the anger is
Mm,
well, the anger is valid, meaning
mm,
the anger you're
yeah.
experiencing it and it's there. And let's assume the anger is also maybe justified. Maybe this person's mother does things that are frustrating, so it's appropriate to be angry about them. And we might call that anger egosyntonic, meaning it's in line with a regular person would be angry under these circumstances. We all get angry at our mothers sometimes. It's fine. Um, and then this, and then the OCD comes in with the thought of, because I'm angry, I'm going to throw my mother down the stairs or do some other terrible thing. And that's an ego dystonic thought. That's frightening. I don't want that to happen. So it's very frustrating for the person experiencing it. They're having ego syntonic experiences of anger and ego dystonic thoughts of what's going to happen in the future when this anger, explodes and violates, your values and principles.
Yeah, yeah, this is one of the points that I want to do this talk with you, John, because it's so interesting how the anger it's some kind ego syntonic because it helps you the this pop up of emotion like it really pushes you to be assertive sometimes, like be like if someone stole your
Has a
money or
purpose. Yeah.
yeah, is the purpose. And the thing is that the it's okay to be angry sometimes, but the thing is how you deal with this. But it really is really confusing because when this match with an obsession and the obsession is ego dystonic, it's some kind of confusing for the people like I'm really angry and this is valid, but I have an intrusive thought to push my mom or stab someone, but it's like, hey, I am feeling this. It's valid to feel angry, but what about if I do this? It's some kind of confusing to separate or diffuse this uh, thought action, yeah, fusion.
Yes, thought exactly. I was just thinking the same thing. Thought action fusion is what's happening there. There's a
Hmm.
confusion between the having of the thought and the doing of a bad thing, right? So when you're angry, you're probably going to also have angry thoughts. And those angry thoughts might be very vivid. They might involve images, of harming people and things like that. Everybody has this experience, but without the OCD, you're like, oh yeah, I'm so mad, I could throw it down the stairs. You don't mean it. It doesn't mean anything. It's just your muscles are angry, your breath is angry, and so are your thoughts. And it doesn't matter. It's okay. You can be angry. But when you add OCD to the equation, those angry thoughts become labeled as dangerous, as problematic, and also as uh, not just threats about what could happen, but for many people, they experience them like they've already done a bad thing. I'm a bad person because I had this thought, right? So they're fusing the having of the thought with the action if it were to come true, even though it's not going to come true and it didn't come true, but I thought about it, so now I feel terrible too. And then you start to obsess about what that's all supposed to mean. So yeah, thought action fusion. And the other thing that made me think of was emotional reasoning. Another term we use a lot in cognitive behavioral therapy, sort of believing something is true primarily because it feels that way. I feel like I could do something, therefore it means I could do something, but that's not true. And that's true in other forms of OCD as well. I feel anxious, therefore it means something bad is going to happen, or I feel guilty, therefore it means I did the wrong thing. But it's not true. We have all kinds of feelings, and they're not always reliable. We can't make assumptions just based on how we feel.
Yes, thank you, John. So I'm gonna translate a little of what we talk about. And so lo que dice John es que justo El tema del enojo y el TOC a veces es muy interesante en algunas ocasiones porque justo la reacción emocional del enojo es egosintónica en el sentido de que el enojo es una reacción muy válida, es una reacción fisiológica que nos ayuda a prepararnos para ser asertivos. Poniendo el ejemplo de si alguien te roba tu dinero, el enojo te ayuda para ser asertivo, confrontar o para resolver eso. El problema es que cuando se suma a la ecuación el tema del TOC, vienen pensamientos intrusivos que son egodistónicos, que no van de la mano con tus valores y son realmente incómodos y generan desagrado, y es cuando esto se vuelve confuso y a veces se presentan distorsiones cognitivas como puede ser la fusión del pensamiento-acción o como el razonamiento emocional. Yes, John. Yeah, we are really talking about what I was really interested to talk about this topic because you can read or you can hear about OCD and you can sometimes see some kind of words like shame or anxiety, and
Right.
OCD, but you can't. It's not so frequently to read about or to hear about angry and OCD, and it's sometimes like some books or some articles that really don't talk about.
Yeah, I agree. Usually, when you hear about anger in relation to obsessions and compulsions, it's specific to obsessive compulsive personality disorder, which is a different condition, but is characterized often by anger as opposed to anxiety. So in OCPD, a person might have very strong beliefs that things should be done a certain way or perfectly or just right. And when other people don't participate or accommodate those needs, the reaction might be an angry reaction. And that's it's a different condition from OCD. It's not it's a common condition for people with OCD to also have, but usually when we talk about anger, we're talking about at least in terms of obsessions and compulsions, we're talking about OCPD. But anger does also exist in OCD, both in the kind of anger that people have towards themselves for not sometimes not being able to, feeling like they can't control their compulsions or angry at themselves for having thoughts that they don't like, or anger towards others for not understanding their OCD or for interfering in their rituals that might make them more time consuming or something like that. And then anger, just as a natural human emotion, but a trigger for the harm OCD. And you might find people are very careful trying to avoid feeling angry or maybe even reading things that might make them angry because they're afraid that if they feel anger, they'll act out and do something bad.
Mm, Yes. Lo que aquí menciona John es que justo conversábamos que a veces hablar de TOC y enojo no es tan frecuente en la bibliografía, ¿no? Tanto en los libros o artículos, y se habla más de otras emociones, o incluso a veces se habla más del TOC, más bien del enojo en el trastorno obsesivo compulsivo de la personalidad, que es un trastorno similar, pero no es igual que el TOC, pero está asociado al TOC. Pero justo, pues bueno, a veces es importante también mencionar un poco de esto. Yes, John. So, yeah. So the thing is, I was thinking about as well for, sometimes some clients say like, "Hey, I can did my exposure for this week because I was very angry." So the thing is like, I didn't do my ERP for homework because I was angry, and because I was angry, maybe I can react for my impulses. Like I can really stab someone. I can really, or I can really hurt myself. And this is sometimes like it's so frequently. I don't know what about you. How have you ever experienced something like that? I think.
Sure, sure. I mean, once you've diagnosed somebody with OCD and you understand what you're treating, um, you can expect that they might say something like this. I was going to do my exposure to watching the scary movie or being near a sharp object, a knife or something like that, but I couldn't do it because I was angry at my boss or my friend or whatever. And I thought if I did it while I was angry, then it would really come true. And what that suggests is that they're still trying to contain or control something that doesn't need to be contained or controlled. You know, they're trying to reassure themselves and be certain that they won't act out, and they don't need that anywhere else in their life. They only need that with their obsession. And so that's like we were talking about before. That's the emotional reasoning. What you know, thinking that something must be true because it feels that way. What we do know from doing exposure and response prevention is that it really is going to be the most useful if well, two things. One, you do the exposures in different states and attitudes and feelings, right? So sometimes you do the exposure when you're very relaxed and it makes you a little bit anxious and you get through it. Sometimes you do the exposure when you're already very stimulated or frustrated or angry. And now your brain knows I can do the exposure kind of no matter what I'm feeling, right? And then there's also this idea of combining fear cues. There's two fears, you know, the sharp object, that's one fear I'm doing exposure to, and anger, that's another fear I'm doing exposure to. And so if you do them both at the same time, it's actually better work. You know, it's more effective. So the person that you're speaking about is saying they didn't do their ERP homework because they were angry and afraid to do it under those circumstances. That might be a very good time to do it. Not to test or to check or to self-reassure, but to actually learn that you know your OCD is not it's not real. It's not your friend. It's just thoughts. You know, it's just uncomfortable feelings. You can get through them.
Yes. Sí, lo que ahorita platicábamos con John es que justo a veces para algunos pacientes las exposiciones que se dejan como tarea o como actividad fuera de la sesión se vuelven difíciles de realizar porque hay pacientes que se fusionan con esos pensamientos de no hice mi exposición porque estaba enojado o estaba en un episodio de enojo, entonces no pudiera llegar a hacerme daño, pero justo algo importante que decía John es que a veces en las EPR, que es la terapia de exposición y prevención de respuesta, ayuda el que una persona pueda estar exponiéndose en diferentes estados de ánimo, porque eso ayuda como a justo activar, ¿no? Esto que es la consecuencia temida, temor central. Yes, so maybe when uh, I was thinking about as well, John, uh, about the last point that you said when you are doing the ERP. When you are doing the ERP, if you are doing well, maybe it's the thing is that the core fear it has to be so it's like you are targeting the core fear, right? So the thing is maybe the person is really it's feeling really it's sometimes I can say like so some clients feel like they are under a panic episode because they are feeling like I am not just feeling anxious and as well I am feeling angry because and the thing is it's complicated because it's so triggering for them like they are dealing with two emotions with anxiety and angry as well and it's
Yeah.
like hey it's complicated to habituate or to deal with these emotions when I am doing my ERP, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. For this population, the anger is causing anxiety, and the anxiety is interpreting the anger incorrectly, which is causing more anxiety. And so it creates this loop where the person gets more and more distressed, and then they start to worry about panic. And and the thing is, like, you can't just push through an exposure while panicking. So the beauty of exposure therapy, exposure and response prevention, is that it's a form of learning. And so you have to be present for the experience in order for it to be effective, right? You don't learn anything from a class if you're not paying attention. So you have to pay attention to what you're doing. But if all of your attention is focused on trying not to have a panic attack, or if you're having a panic attack and you can't focus, well, then you're not going to get the most out of your ERP. So here's the challenge is can you be in the presence of anger? Can you experience some anxiety, but can you keep it in a zone of tolerability where it's difficult and activating, but not so intense that your brain,
Yeah.
can't handle it, can't process it.
Mhm.
Anger in particular is not something that you want to spend a lot of time with, right? Even though it's a normal human emotion, it would
Yeah.
be better to experience less of it, right? Because it's not effective. It's a response to um, not being able to control something, and we want to learn to be more psychologically flexible. So, yeah, I'm thinking about your patient who gets angry at his mother and then has the harm OCD. It would be better not to have the harm OCD, but it would also be better if he could
Mhm.
manage his feelings of anger towards his mother in a way that was healthier for him, so it didn't take up so much energy, right?
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
learning to down regulate in an exposure is
Mhm.
important. I think sometimes people think you're not allowed to do anything to calm yourself down
Mhm.
because that might be a compulsion, but I don't think that's true. You
Mhm.
could do things to calm
Yeah.
yourself down. They just can't be reassurance. They can't
Yeah.
be about the thought itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's this last thing that you said, it's something more about mindfulness and act framework, because yeah, that's why I really love some kinds of act and mindfulness stuff, because it really complements, or really, sorry, it really, how do I say it? It really it's another approach that really sums up to the ERP process. Ya, lo que aquí nos dice también John es que justo a veces es válido dentro de la misma EPR o dentro de la misma exposición que la persona pueda llegar a una desescalada emocional cuando se trata del enojo, porque ayuda más también a la exposición, porque la persona está lidiando con dos emociones que son la ansiedad y el enojo. Entonces a veces los altos niveles de enojo no pueden ser tan funcionales, y justo a veces no se aprovecha tanto la misma exposición, ¿no? So yeah, John. I think we are okay in time, but maybe we can talk a little bit more. And I was thinking about as well for um some kinds of comorbidities like bipolar disorder, or we can talk about more about borderline personality disorders, that sometimes frequently for the OCD diagnostic. And this is kind of, you know, it's complicated for some clients, because it's hard for them to differentiate when they are really feeling angry and when they can do something impulsive, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of um, there's a crossover with OCD symptoms and borderline personality disorder symptoms. This is not so unusual for a person to have them both. And on the subject of anger and impulsivity, these are the people that tend to struggle the most with harm OCD, because one of the characteristics of borderline personality disorder is an unstable sense of self, right? They're not really sure who they are sometimes. It's very confusing for them. So most people with OCD, if they don't have a condition like borderline personality disorder, very, very deep down, they feel confident and sort of stable in their sense of self. They know who they are. They say, I have these terrible thoughts. They're so scary. I don't want to hurt anybody. And you say, yeah, but do you think you would? And they say, no, I know I would never do it, but because that's not who I am. But it's still very disturbing to have these scary thoughts and feelings. But a person with borderline personality disorder might struggle with that. You say, well, deep down though, you don't really want to do this. And they check in deep down and they get a very confusing message. They think they don't want to do it. They're, pretty sure, but sometimes they can't tell. That's part of the conditions. They don't feel safe and connected to their sense of self. So that can be terrifying. I mean, that can be just the worst. So it's like it's having harm OCD. No, you're not going to hurt anyone. But at the same time, you can't be certain. But at the same time, you also can't be certain about who you are as a person. And that just seems, even scarier. And these individuals also sometimes do struggle with controlling their impulses and might engage in self-harm or suicidal ideation or things like that. So I think it's very important if somebody has both of those conditions that they're getting the appropriate treatment because you need to balance the ERP with DBT skills. They need to be able to confront their fears, but they also need to be able to regulate their emotions and work on distress tolerance.
Yes. Aquí lo que dice John es justamente lo que estamos platicando es que a veces en el TOC es frecuente encontrar comorbilidades como pueden ser el trastorno límite de la personalidad, donde lo que se frecuenta o lo que caracteriza este trastorno es la disregulación emocional, que es justo esta incapacidad por regular o controlar las emociones adecuadamente y esto a veces conlleva a conductas impulsivas de autodaño o, o a veces incluso ideación suicida o daño hacia otras personas, pero justamente algo aquí importante es poder realmente estar familiarizado tanto con el trabajo desde la EPR, afrontando estos miedos o estos detonadores, pero también ayudar a las personas a esta regulación emocional. Yes, John. So, I don't know, if you can say something else like I was I was thinking in some questions, but maybe I can skip something like you can say before, but you can add something something else like we were saying.
Well, I think the thing that is important to add, no matter what's going on, whether we're talking about OCD or borderline personality disorder or harm OCD or bipolar disorder, whatever the challenges that you face that might be causing you to have a unhappy relationship with your thoughts and feelings, we absolutely must look at self-compassion as an essential part of the treatment. It's not something that you do when you get around to it or because it's nice or therapists like to talk about it. It's essential to all of the treatment because self-compassion is what stabilizes the sense of self. It's what gives you the self-confidence to say, that's my OCD. I'm not going to respond to that. It's what helps you self-validate when you're feeling angry and calm your anger down and say, okay, I'm angry, but I don't need to stay in that anger. So all of that is very much connected to self-compassion, which means learning how to treat yourself more objectively and with more basic fundamental kindness that you would offer anybody else, anybody who wasn't your enemy. So I always, with any discussion about mental health, I always make sure that the discussion ends with recognizing the importance of self-compassion, because without self-compassion, you're not going to fight hard enough to beat the OCD because you won't care enough about yourself. Without self-compassion, you won't take the risk of treating your thoughts differently because you won't think that you're worth it. And that's at the core of so many mental health problems. You're definitely worth it.
Yeah, so yeah, I was thinking as well about the self-compassion approach. It's something like you have to really add for the ERP and all the mindfulness work because self-compassion is really it's you can apply or you can do this as you said like when you are experiencing some kind of angry episode or some kind of outburst episode or any kind of OCD episode. It's not for some kind of diagnostics because the self-compassion it's a skill that I think it's a skill it's so underestimated like yeah it's something it's sometimes like it's on a skill that is not so um is you can read more about ERP or CBT stuff, and you you can see more uh by blog some read or some books about other stuff, but maybe you can reach know so many information about self compassion, and I think. we as psychotherapists, we can do much things about since the self-compassion approach, because it's really interesting how you can improve the outcomes with clients, not even with OCD, with
Yeah.
even with other diagnostics or other problems. Yeah, so it was really a pleasure, John. I don't know if you can if you we don't have for today's questions, and maybe we can when we post this video we can have some questions later, but and maybe we can do in future second part. I think we
Yeah,
can
yeah,
do
that would
some kind
be
of yeah.
yeah, that would be fun. And it's yeah, really grateful to
Mm.
have met you and have a chance to talk to you some more. It's obvious to me that you understand OCD very well and that you're helping a lot of people with OCD where you are. So that means a lot to me. You know, I'm here at work, I'm helping the people in front of me, and so whenever I realize that there are people all over the world getting helped with OCD, it's a good feeling. It's a good thing to know.
Yes, thank you, John. I'm gonna translate something. Yeah. Lo que, bueno, al final hablaba John también sobre la autocompasión. La autocompasión es un enfoque no tan nuevo, pero que es algo de lo que no se habla tan frecuente en comparación, por ejemplo, a la EPR o al mindfulness o a otras o a terapias cognitivo-conductuales, porque justo, pues bueno, es una habilidad que también es muy utilizable no solo para el TOC, sino para otros trastornos en cuestión de salud mental. Y pues bueno, también John nos habla de que pues posiblemente ya en otra ocasión estemos hablando más sobre este tema y que pues está muy agradecido de estar aquí compartiendo con personas de otros lados. Thank you, John. So, yeah,
Jose, can I ask you a question? I
yeah,
was
yeah,
listening to the Spanish, and is
yeah,
the Spanish word for self-compassion autocompasión?
yeah, 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 yeah,
It's very interesting, right? Because in English, auto-compassion is what it sounds like.
yeah,
And we think of auto as automatic. And I just love that the Spanish word for self-compassion is automatic compassion, right? Because that's what it should be. It should be
yeah,
automatic. I know in Spanish, auto means like, you know, towards the self, but I
yeah,
love this idea that it should also be like automatic, like immediate compassion. It's
great.
linguistically very interesting.
Yeah, I didn't think about that because it's so natural to say autocompasión. Ya, ahorita
Yeah.
lo que decía John es que la palabra autocompasión en español habla de esta compasión hacia uno mismo, pero en inglés autocompasión o autocompassion o esta la palabra auto es más automático, ¿no? Más como inmediato, como espontáneo, vaya. Thank you, John. So yeah, I'm really grateful to sharing this with you because I really have so many clients that really struggle with OCD and anger, and it's sometimes confusing for them. And I think, yeah, I think that we as psychotherapists we can do more stuff about angry and not just anxiety. Yeah, I think like anxiety is the core emotion maybe in OCD, but I think like OCD it's a really important emotion that sometimes it's blurred or be a part of this, and it's not sometimes really be considered in this topic.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. So I'm gonna pause this.